My name is Brian M. Biggs. The place is MASS-2 headquarters, northwest of Danang, Vietnam. MASS-2 was a Marine Air Support Squadron located on a ridge overlooking Danang, Vietnam. It's important to me because during the Vietnam War, I spent a year there as a Marine lieutenant. My son was born while I was in Vietnam, and I took Super 8 movies of all my activities so I could send them home to my family. I returned to Danang in October 2001 to visit two Vietnamese friends I work with on my tour of duty as a Marine Civic Action Officer. My two friends, Mr. Huan and Miss Sun, welcomed me into their homes, introduced me once again to their culture, and provided an opportunity for me to remember some events from that time. Miss Sun's nephew, Mr. Phuc, who spoke perfect English, helped me find the old MASS-2 headquarters location where I lived for a year. Here's how that memory evolved. Mr. Phuc and I ride his motorbike northwest up Highway 1, away from Danang, and toward the village of Hoa Mi. It's hot, well into the 90s, and the air smells of sewage and gasoline and fresh baked French bread, the same as it smelled in 1966. About a kilometer before the elementary school where I taught English to Mr. Phuc's aunt and other teachers, I recognize the road to MASS-2. I point to the left and tell Mr. Phuc to turn. There are more houses on this road now, some newly constructed with fresh coats of paint in Easter egg colors, pink and chartreuse and orange. We drive toward the ridgeline anchored by Hill 327 and at the eastern end where the old 327PX was located. At the base of the ridge, we see the road that goes up to MASS-2. It's still a narrow dirt road, and I start to shiver with excitement when our motorbike begins to climb. Mr. Phuc pauses at the fork in the road where it either goes down to the rock quarry or up to the top of the hill. I turn around on Mr. Phuc's motorbike and see the sapphire-colored Bay of Danang, still framed by two steep mountains, Hai Pass to the north and Monkey Mountain to the south. I tell Mr. Phuc to head up the hill, and the road closes in on us with overgrown foliage. But in less than a minute, we reach the flat, grassy area where MASS-2 Marines mustered during the war. The terrain looks familiar, the same as the terrain in my Super 8 movies, but the buildings and tents are gone. Now it's just overgrown foliage. The water tanks, the CO's tent, the S1 office, and the Butler building up on the hill are all gone. In the summer of 1966, at this grassy area, we watched Frank Sutton, who played Sergeant Carter on the Gomer Pyle Show, tell a few jokes. This used to be a small city, I say to Mr. Phuc. The large complex on this hill, built by the U.S. military, was so permanent then, so vital, that all the structures were destroyed or dismantled. Not a trace remains. I point toward where our huge Butler building stood. See that flat, graded area over there? Yes, Mr. Phuc says. That's where our supply building was. And just below that, we had a platform, a deck with a canvas tarp around the sides for our community shower. And our Club Vagabond, was just below where we're standing. As I look at the spot where Club Vagabond once stood, my memory goes to Eric Barnes. He was in Vietnam at the same time I was and visited me shortly after my son was born. We spent the evening at our club. Eric was a singer. He had a band in college, so he borrowed Henry Lee's guitar and entertained MASS-2 Marines well into the night. Eric and I were friends in basic school and lived next door to each other in Quantico's housing for married officers. That night I showed Eric pictures of my son and bragged about how big he was, 9 pounds, 6 ounces, and 21 inches long. After we closed down the club, I drove Eric to the airbase so he could catch his R&R flight to Hawaii in the morning. He was going to meet his wife, Noreen. I told Eric to call me when he got back, and he said he would. He jumped out of my Jeep with his gear and jogged in the rain up to the Quonset Hut terminal, where he stopped, turned to wave, and then ducked inside. That was the last time I saw Eric Barnes. He was killed on a patrol shortly after he returned from R&R. Mr. Phuc is quiet. He lets me have my moment of reflection. I finally point into a patch of small palm trees. There were tents up there, cabins really. I used to play in the American cabins, Mr. Fuchs says. You did? Up here? No, near my home, down by the sea. There was many American buildings left in that area. It was not a busy area like now, but a rural area, so we children could run on the streets with no fear. We went into the American cabins and played a game called hiding and finding. Do you know that game? Yes, we called it hide and seek. That was a fun game, Mr. Fuchs says. The finder or seeker must face a wall of the cabin and count by 5, 10, 15, 20, maybe to 100. Then the seeker goes to seek those who hide. When the seeker finds someone, the two must run fast and touch the wall. At the wall, the one who was found must say, "Dap Mang," or in English, I think, "Prove my soul." Why did they say, "Prove my soul," I say? Mr. Fuchs tilts his head back to look at the sky for a moment. Then he says, "We just said that when we touched the wall. My older cousins taught me the game. Maybe it happened because the person or live soul can save his friend or dead soul. The person who touched the wall can shout out a name of one person who is still hiding. That person's soul is saved, and the seeker must continue to search for others who hide." Mr. Fuchs takes a drink from his water bottle. "You play that game when you were a child?" "Yes, often," I say. Mr. Fuchs turns his motorbike around so we can drive down the road. It's steep. Mr. Fuchs is a good driver and goes slow.